Hey folks, it's time your frugal prepper. I got a Nissan Maxima that needs a door hinge, but the customer states on this one that it will run fine for a while and then it'll just die and the brakes get all stiff on it and won't restart and runs like crap. I think they've had somebody else working on it. I see somebody's replaced the battery terminal here. But that it just will die and then won't restart, and then it'll start acting fine again. Key things there: brakes get stiff. Tells me vacuum leak. Tells me my first place to start on this would be a sticking purge valve, which I believe the purge valve is right up here. Yep. My guess is that that's sticking open. It acts like a vacuum leak, causes the brakes to get spongy, causes it not to run right. But let's plug a scan tool into it and see what we get. If I remember right from working on this one before, the check engine light may be burnt out on this guy. So let's hook up a scan tool and see. There. Okay. Communicating with the vehicle. Reading codes from module engine. Okay. So all of our IM monitors look okay. It doesn't have heated catalysts, but those look okay. All right. Oh, sorry, I'm just getting over a bad cold. Read codes. Let's read the codes. Camshaft position sensor circuit A, bank 2. Well, that's not good. Idle air control system, revolutions per minute higher than expected. Oxygen sensor circuit, slow response. No DTC definition. No definition. Catalyst system efficiency. It has an exhaust leak, so I wouldn't be too surprised by those. But the camshaft position sensor A, circuit bank 2 is one code. Catalyst, no DTC definition. Okay. Oxygen sensor circuit, slow response. I'm not going to worry about that with the exhaust leak. Idle air control, revolutions per minute higher than expected. Now that could be caused by a vacuum leak, right? So basically it's saying, hey, I have the idle air control at a certain position here, and for some reason it's running, it's got higher RPMs. So I believe, let's see if this has a map sensor. I believe this is the speed density engine. So vacuum leak will cause a high idle, which will probably throw that code. And it has an electronic throttle body. It does have a mass airflow sensor. Okay, so it's not a speed density engine, but it's still idling higher than it needs to. What I'm going to do is take this loose. We'll unplug this sensor. We'll take this loose. We're going to see if we have a vacuum leak right here. We can probably trip this a few times and see, but this should seal up tight and have no vacuum leak. So let's check that first. I'm still going to go with that, testing the purge valve first. Okay, so I've got the one side of this hooked to battery ground. My test light's hooked to battery positive. So I'm just going to come in here and we're going to touch this top terminal, and that should activate the solenoid and it should lose its vacuum. Yep. And so now we're just going to keep doing that several times and see if it Seems to close off correctly every time. So I'll keep testing this and we'll see. Alright, so I've tested and tested this thing over and over again. It's closing every time. I don't see any problem with the purge valve. So I think what I'm going to do next is look at the fuel temps and see if we have evidence of high fuel trims, and that would tell us we got a vacuum leak. And just kind of do a visual inspection here and look for anything that's torn beyond the MAF sensor. And it doesn't look like it, but we'll find out here, and we'll go from there. Okay, we'll go to custom data list. We don't need to view instructions. We want to see short-term fuel trim 1, fuel trim 2, long-term fuel trim 1, long-term fuel trim 2. Okay. So number 2 is way different than number 1 is. Way different. I got one adding fuel, and ooh, that one's taking away a lot of fuel. That one's taking away a whole lot of fuel. That's interesting. Okay. Alright, it just got done raining a little bit, but anyway, I did hook up the smoke machine here, checked it for any vacuum leaks, and I couldn't find any. Not a single darn one in an engine is sold. It's amazing. So, you know, we just have to see what the heck's going on. So I guess what I'm going to do is get a better scan tool out here. I got my Craftsman. I'm going to hook that up, see if I can figure out what those undefined codes were, because this will have OEM data for Nissan on it, and just see what we're dealing with here. V6. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That's good enough. Okay. So here's it. Okay, P0507, electric throttle control actuator intake air leak PCV system. Okay, that's a different code. Well, it's got a little bit more. Intake, so electronic throttle control actuator intake air leak PCV system. So we're gonna check on that. And I checked for an intake air leak. Can't find one with the smoke machine. I guess you could have a bad PCV valve. If this has a PCV valve, we'll see. And you know, the electronic throttle body is definitely a concern. I did take it off and look. It doesn't look dirty or gummed up. Okay, 507 idle speed control system. Purge volume control valve. Now that's the one that I caused. That's the catalyst error. Now we have, this is the 1147. So this is the H2O2. So this is the O2 sensor 2 bank 1. Okay, which would be the hall monitor sensor, because sensor 1 would be the one for the fuel ratio, and that's again sensor 2 bank 1, sensor 2 bank 1, sensor 2 bank 1. Okay, so we have O2 sensor codes for sensor 2 on bank 1, which I'm okay with, because that's probably where the exhaust leak is. And we have the camshaft position sensor circuit bank 2. And so let's take a look at the fuel trims on this scan tool. I mean, mean, she really idles way up. And it takes her a while to start to come down. So, trimming 2.3 off the short, adding 5.5 on the long, and then we're trimming 7 and we're trimming 7 and negative 1.6 off of bank 2. Bank 2 is also where we have the bad camshaft position sensor. So do we have a problem with that camshaft position sensor? I think that's what I'm going to go after. I mean, I've smoke tested it. I know there's an exhaust leak that's probably affecting my O2 sensors, but I also know that the primary O2 sensors on each side are in the actual manifold. So unless the manifold or something's cracked, I don't think that's the problem. So I think we need to go after that camshaft position sensor. Circuit error code. I don't know if this engine has variable valve timing or not, but I'm wondering if maybe that's not just causing a problem, because those fuel trims are off on bank 2. I don't see a vacuum leak, and it's trimming too much fuel out. So we could also have a leaky injector, right? But I think it's more likely that we got something going on timing wise, maybe. Okay, so bank 2 is the front bank, and what I'm checking here is I'm on the positive wire for the camshaft position sensor. I've got 12.25 volts there. So now that I know what the voltage of it, I'm going to go ahead and test it with the test light, make sure it's got good, it can carry a load. Go ahead and hook this up to our ground and test this guy. Yep. And now I'll go ahead and touch it to here, and yes, so the positive wire is carrying a load. So now we're going to test the ground wire, and then we'll have to check and see if we're getting a signal from it with the scope. If we're getting a signal from it, I have to figure out maybe where the computer is in this guy. See if I'm getting a signal at the computer from it. And then we'll see what's going on here. We'll see if the sensor's bad or we got a wiring issue. So here I am hooked up to the ground to it. That seems fine. According to the book, it said this was the bank 2 sensor, and it had an arrow pointing to the front of the engine. It's right where it said it was, so I believe this is bank 2 in the front. The wiring harness was rubbing pretty good right here. So that's where I'm thinking I might have a rub through. But yeah, we definitely have a good ground. I'm hooked to battery positive there. So now we need to see if we're getting a signal. Well, she's definitely getting a signal. Still hear that timing chain just slapping around in here. So the question is are we dealing with a current code or an old code? I guess that's the real question. Let's go ahead and erase all these codes. Maybe. We'll reconnect the tool here. Let's do an erase, yes. think the OEM enhanced will do a live data on this. She's still idling too high. So we still have an idle speed control system, engine speed input circuit, range performance, 10, electronic throttle control. PO726, that's interesting. But nothing for the crankshaft position sensor. I wonder if that's gotten disconnected at some other time by some other mechanic and it's never got plugged back in, because I got a signal, it looks good. And I think the computer's getting it, but I can't verify it without tearing it down to the ECM. But we got powers and ground, so it would just be that signal wire isn't getting back, but I think it is. So, engine speed, input circuit, range performance. I'm thinking this might be an electronic throttle body problem. Okay, so that PO7 whatever code that I was getting that was saying there was a engine idle input sensor malfunction or whatever, that can be caused by a cam or a crank sensor. So that tells me that it's probably not seeing the input from that bank 2 sensor correctly, and it probably just hasn't rethrown the code yet, the actual OBD2 code, since I cleared it. But I pulled up the cam crank correlation, a known good cam crank correlation off of Pico's, out of their software. They have a waveform library, and you can go in here and look them up and find a lot of good cam crank correlations. This one happens to have one out there. You do have to have a Picoscope hooked up to your computer, and you have to be running the Picoscope software, and you have to have a forum login to get to these. But these right here alone just a lot of times make it worth it to buy a Picoscope. So I was just checking to see, because it seemed like, like maybe I should get like a 0 to 5 or 0 to 7 volt off of that Hall Effect, camshaft position sensor, but I was getting more closer to 12, and sure enough, 11.59 is normal. This is about the waveform I was getting. I was getting like a long single, too short, long single, too short. So that's looks like the pattern that I'm getting. It has a little bit of noise in it like mine did, and I think that's fine. It's usually just a little bit of noise in the electrical. So we could check the other sensor, and we could check the camshaft or the crankshaft as well. But right now I'm just going to track down this one. I did verify in all data that that cylinder is bank 2. If you look at the firing order here, specifications, so this would be the front where the harmonic balancer is, which is on the passenger side, which means that this would turn around that way. So bank 2 would be the one that starts with cylinder 2 over here. So that is bank 2. So I'm on the right side, the front of the engine, the engine side engine that's toward the front of the car, let's say. So what I'm going to do next, I do believe, is find out where the ECM or the PCM, whatever Nissan calls it, the computer lives, the engine computer. Find the wire colors for the bank 2 camshaft position sensor, and we're going to take a measurement of that signal wire in there, and we're going to see if we're getting a signal to it or not, and then we'll track down the broken wire or try to figure out what's going on. But I know the sensor's fine. It's probably something in the wiring that's rubbed through or broken or something. So that will happen later, because I'm done for tonight. I'm not feeling great, and I'm done. And we'll see if this solves the idle speed issues. I don't know if this is the problem with it stalling, but I haven't been able to duplicate that, but I do know this is a problem. So I want to try to at least establish what's wrong here. I mean, as old as that car is, if it does have a broken sensor wire and I don't find it really quick, I'm running a new one and bypassing, you know. But I'll check the harness for some rub points and see if we can't locate it. But I think that's what we're looking at. Anyway, this will do it. We'll call this part 1, and then I will, you know, have a part 2, maybe a part 3 later on. But sometimes you have to fight your way through these diagnoses. You know, they're not straightforward. And you know what I usually do is pick a problem that I know exists and try to troubleshoot that, and then hopefully that's the whole problem. You know, hopefully we're not chasing down this problem and there's another problem. We do know that there's an exhaust leak, catalyst efficiency error, stuff like that, but you know, that's definitely not going to cause the problems that we're seeing, I don't think. So I think we're just running rich on that bank, and it's having to subtract fuel because it's not able to position the cam right because it doesn't have a camshaft position sensor signal. So we'll see what we find out.